Going? It's good to see you. There is Myra of Lunch and Learn fame.
Thanks.
Hi, Gila. Okay, so I'm doing a little bit, I'm going out of order today because I was inspired by thinking about Shabbat with some of you on Shabbat, where I got to talk about Heschel with people who disagreed with Heschel. So I'm skipping to the end. We'll go back because there's a couple more of the lessons, but I'm skipping to page 52. So if you want to look on page 52. This is Shabbat as a mitzvah, or Shabbat qua mitzvah. And before we look at the text of Rambam, of Maimonides, the great doctor, I'd love to hear from folks. For you,
where is the material? Where can I find it?
Okay.
1 second, Gila, I'll put it right there.
It was also attached. It's always attached to the.
Oh, it is attached?
Is it not?
I'm going to look.
It was this week, yeah.
Let me see.
Hello, what page are we?
We're not yet, but it's so good to see you, especially good to see people who were here this past Shabbat. So
yeah, I got it.
Good. So we're on page 52, but before we're on page 52, I'd love to hear thoughtfully what Shabbat has meant to you. We will do our Lasok B'divrei Torah in just a little bit, but first I want you to take maybe 20 seconds to think about the role of Shabbat for you, not what you do, but what it does for you. Not what you do to observe Shabbat, but what Shabbat does to you or to your life. And we're going to take 10 seconds of quiet and then invite you to participate. Then we're going to start with the great Rambam. So just take a few moments to think about not how you observe Shabbat, but what Shabbat does for you, which is a little bit turning it on its edge and reminds me of that great Zionist thinker, Asher Ginsburg, AKA also known as Achad Ha'am, who says more than the Jews have kept the Shabbat. What's the second part?
The Shabbat kept the Jews.
The Shabbat kept the Jews. So not how we lasot Shabbat, how we do Shabbat, but think about what Shabbat does or has done for either you or your family or something. So take a moment. Okay, anyone want to go? Yes, Allison.
So Shabbat absolutely gives me a chance to just breathe, to stop and breathe and reflect on the past week and the week ahead. It's become a very important moment of just, being still and recognizing the transition.
Thank you. Someone else want to go? Najat? Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So for me, who's quite new to Shabbat, it has helped me stop feeling guilty about getting rest. Before that, I was always busy and I couldn't, if I took some time just for me, I would, self-flagellate about it. And now it's okay. I know it's a mitzvah.
Shabbat as self-care. Good.
Yes.
There's an acronym for Shabbat. If you take each letter, Shena, B'Shabbat, Tanug. Sleep on Shabbat is a great delight. And there's no better sleep than Shabbos sleep. Okay. Anyone else? Mike, do you want to go?
Yes. For me, it's a feeling of more spirituality than usual, and also that I'm part of something that's greater than I am. And I belong to this group and all the people in it, or with them.
So it's about community. Okay, thank you. Someone else, anyone else, what Shabbat has done for you? Not what, yeah, Myra.
It's a time when I get to reflect on the bigger picture and get in touch with myself in a different way than I do during the week, and reflect on spiritual things, future ideas that I might want to pursue.
It's a time for stopping and reflection for you. Okay. Anyone else? Yeah, Suzanne.
For me, it centers me for the week to come. Don't know how or why. It just gives me that place so that I can start afresh. Afresh.
I've always thought of Shabbat for me as the beginning and end. Like without it, the days and the weeks just seem like ceaseless regularity. And I, as someone who is observant of Shabbat in many ways, I often look at my siblings and I would say, but when's the day that you stop? Like, how do you know? How do you know in your life when should be the day when you don't have that guilt maybe, or don't do anything? And like, when do you start over? And I guess for me, it's the day of, there's the end of the week and there's the beginning, and you get to do over. You get a do over, or you get to start again. That's what it does for me. Anyone else like to go?
Sundown when Shabbat is over on Saturday.
What did you say? I didn't hear you, Mike.
Sundown Saturday when Shabbat is over is the end and the beginning.
Nice. Havdalah. So Havdalah is as important. Okay. Moses Maimonides, a philosopher, scholar, born in Spain, ends up working all over, even Egypt. He writes a more important book than I would say, or not more important, but more interesting book than the one we're going to read is his Guide to the Perplexed, which I feel like should be written in modern times because everyone is perplexed. But this is instead on page 52, his book called the Mishneh Torah. If you were in a yeshiva, it would probably be called the Mishneh Torah, pronounced, that way. So what does Mishneh Torah mean?
What does it mean?
Yeah, the word Mishneh Torah.
Study the Torah.
Yeah, a study of the Torah, right? A study, vishinantem, from the word lishanot, a study of Torah. Some people say as a joke, also you could see the word sheni in it maybe, and it is a second kind of Torah because this is just laws. And it's really a compilation of laws that is much easier to read than the Talmud, which was, of course, maybe 600 years earlier. So, all right, let's hear, remember this class is about mitzvah. Let's hear what Rambam Maimonides, the great doctor, the great physician, says. Also, I sometimes feel like, wow, he was a doctor and a rabbi. That's pretty cool. But I do have one colleague who's a physician and a rabbi, or two of them. Okay. Who's going to read? To rest on the seventh day of the week. Could someone read? We have a volunteer.
I'll read.
Who's going? Myra?
Linda.
Okay. Oh, Linda. Great.
Yeah. You're gonna read here. Okay, good. I'll hold.
Bob, let it go. Thank you. To rest on the seventh day of the week is a positive mitzvah, for it is written, on the seventh day you shall rest. Exodus 23:12. Anyone who works on it negates a positive mitzvah while transgressing a negative mitzvah, for it is written, you shall do no work. Exodus 20:10. What penalty does that person deserve for doing work? If the person did it voluntarily, willfully, they deserve karet. Karet. If they acted in the presence of witnesses who forewarned them, they are stoned. If they acted unintentionally, they must bring a standard sin offering.
Wow, there is so much to unpack in this paragraph. So let's go back to the beginning. Shvita b'shishi mimlacha mitzvat aseh. So we're working on the word mitzvat aseh versus a mitzvah lo ta'aseh. What's a mitzvat aseh?
You shall do.
You shall do. Aseh, do. Versus a mitzvat lo ta'aseh. Don't do. And they are equally important. Although probably many of us think that the ones that say like don't murder are more important than others. He's going to say they're all important. And this is a positive mitzvah. So actually, what makes it a positive mitzvah? You actually have to do something.
Rest.
Yep, you have to do a thing. And if you don't do that, then you're actually breaking Shabbat. That's interesting. We don't think of it that way usually, right? Usually people will be like, oh, did you spend money on Shabbat? Did you cook on Shabbat? But this is saying if you didn't do the rest, if you didn't take that nap like Najat wants to do and I want to do Shabbat afternoon, then you're actually breaking Shabbat because you're not doing the positive. Okay, anyone who works on it negates a positive mitzvah and also a negative mitzvah. So how do you do a positive mitzvah and a negative mitzvah? So now we're getting into the system of how Jewish law works. It's the same thing. I get up and let's say I go and spend money. I have now transgressed two different mitzvot. What are they?
You didn't rest on Shabbat, and
Yeah.
you did melacha.
I did melacha, right? I didn't rest, so that's one mitzvah. And I actually went to the store and did melacha. I did sacred work. Melacha, which we've talked about before, but melacha, anyone want to define what melacha is? Yeah, Dr. Bob.
Dr. Bob, who did not write the Mishnah Torah and did not conduct clinics for the Caliph of Egypt either.
Okay.
So any case, it's any work that has to do with the building of the temple that is related to the Mishkan. So if you can tie that work that you're doing, thing you're doing, to the building of the Mishkan, for which we are forbidden to do, that means it is work that is forbidden for the Shabbat.
Right. And we know that the ancient rabbis say there are 39 different categories of this work. And even something modern, like a combustion engine, the rabbis will sit and figure out which milacha does this fit into. So for those of you who don't use electricity on Shabbat, one would have to say, well, which of the 39 forbidden labors does turning a light switch on which fit into which of those 39 labors? And I'm going to ask you, this is a trick question because I don't actually think it fits into any of them. Some rabbis, and I use electricity on Shabbat, some rabbis in the not ancient, there's no ancient electricity. Some rabbis years ago would say it is boneh, building. What are you building? They thought that somehow you were building an electric circuit by turning the light on, as opposed to the electricity just naturally being there. So when you actually go milacha by milacha, it's pretty hard to find out which one says you can't use electricity on Shabbat. So many rabbis will say, oh, you can't use it because it's not beruach Shabbat. What's that?
The spirit of Shabbat.
Yeah, it's not the spirit of Shabbat, but they say that because they can't find the particular, any lawyers on the phone tonight? Any lawyers on they can't find the particular case law. So they say, okay, it's not in the spirit of Shabbat. But here we have two different mitzvot that we are breaking. One's a positive and one's a negative. Okay. Anyone have anything they want to add before we continue on the Rambam? Oh, we never do into a bracha. I'm so sorry. She put it in there. Join me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Holy One, who commands us to engage in Torah study and into doing Torah. So anyone want to say anything about this paragraph of Rambam? Yeah.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
So if you can use electricity, would the prohibitions then be one by one? Like you can't cook? You can turn on an electric stove, but you couldn't cook, let's say.
Correct.
So
you can't cook. Cooking is it's a different milacha.
Right. So
you can never cook on Shabbat.
So you could use electricity, you just can't do the things that electricity allows you to do, depending on what it is. Is that, would that be correct?
Right. Although I would turn a light on, people are turning Zooms on all the time. Or here's the big question. Can you use a microwave on Shabbat? Because the microwaves were not invented during the time of the Talmud, I promise you.
But it is cooking.
Can you warm something up?
Is it always cooking?
If it started before
No.
Shabbat. I'm just asking, what's that famous dish? I forget, blocking on the name.
No, so
cholent.
Cholent, right. So here's cholent, which is one of my favorite foods, and Suzanne has made it. No, you cannot cook on Shabbat, but you can warm on Shabbat. So there's lots of minutia of details. What it means is I can't cook on Shabbat means all the food I'm going to eat on Shabbat is cooked before Shabbat. And in fact, it is.
What about watching TV?
Well, that's a whole different ball of wax.
Why? It's the same thing.
Yeah. But then you're going to decide, is that the activity you want to do on Shabbat? Then it's about a question of Ruach Shabbat.
Not resting.
The electricity, it's on. Okay, let's go to the next paragraph. We have a lot.
Interesting. Thank you.
Question, Rabbi, what is karet in this paragraph?
Oh, sorry. Karet means that you will be cut off from your people. Karet is one of the biblical punishments. It's terrible. It means you will be cut off. Now, some people, I'll just explain a little more. Some people believe that it means that the Jewish community would cut you off. You would be cut off from your people. I believe that it can be understood much differently. Here it is. If you are someone who thinks it's okay to eat bread on Pesach, how connected are you to your people? You are literally cut off from your people. You are taking an action that cuts you off. By the way, when they say stoned, they do not mean taking drugs. They generally, and they also don't mean that you're standing there and people throw stones at you. They generally meant one large boulder that was meant to kill you. This is not a nice piece of text. This is that, 11, 1200s, the rules for breaking the Sabbath were, if you did it willfully and voluntarily, karet, you'll be cut off. But if you acted with witnesses, meaning if the witnesses told you not to do it, then you were liable for death, the death penalty. Do you think this ever happened?
Maybe.
It might be.
I mean, we don't think it ever happened because there wasn't a time until 1948 where Jews actually had any control over the laws of they were governed by. This is a little bit fantasy, right? We didn't control the courts. And certainly this is not how the courts in the state of Israel work. Okay, let's go to the next paragraph. 4 things. Linda, can you keep going?
Sure.
We want to see that dog later too.
Yeah. Okay. Hold on a second. Sorry. 4 things have been enjoined regarding the Sabbath, 2 on biblical authority and 2 on the authority of the sages and clearly expressed by the prophets. The Torah says, remember, Exodus 28, and observe, Deuteronomy 5:12. The prophets clearly speak of honor and delight, as it is written, call the Sabbath a delight and the Lord's sacred day an honor, Isaiah 58:13.
If you were here in Shul on Shabbat, this is a text that I used, the Shabbat discussion, where everyone started laughing, right? Because I told them that later the rabbis understood as oneg as intimacy with your partner. So Shabbat should be honor and delightful. Anyone want to? Now we're going to go and see what they mean by this. Who's going to read? Mike, are you reading? Oh, we can't hear you.
I have a question. Is that okay?
Sure.
With everything going on in Israel now, how about all this come together and work?
We don't live by halachic law in Israel. Israel is based still on British mandate and other law. We don't live under halachic law, under Jewish law. Thank
That's
God.
what Yahoo wants.
No, it's a little, he wants judicial reform, but not necessarily this.
All right.
He wants more, he wants it applied to the criminal system. He wants to be able to have the government be able to make decisions about criminal proceedings. Most likely some of those criminal proceedings that actually will involve him.
That's right.
So, yeah. Laura, did you, you're on.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, yeah, of course, this language is very troubling. And I wonder, when you talk about this now, do you say, well, it's a historical record of how it was in those days and how people understood, like how you were governed or how you respected law? It was a lot based on fear. But now we look at it that it's more symbolic, that if you don't keep Shabbat, some of your soul will no longer really be alive. Like, is that what you would say if you were teaching this to younger kids, or, you know?
I wouldn't teach this to younger kids. And specifically, I waited on Shabbos to have the younger kids leave. I think that, as I said to all of you, we the Jewish people didn't have this legal system and the ability to govern ourselves after we governed ourselves sort of till the year 70, but there were governors over us. And then for the last 2,000 years, we haven't governed ourselves. So this was in someone's mind. This is what was in the Torah, and they put it down as the legal system. But no, I don't want this kind of theocracy, this kind of legal system, any more than my progressive Muslim friends want Sharia law. Right?
Right, but it's still part of our texts.
Sure.
And so we look at it, but we understand it in a historical context more than.
I understand. You brought up the historical and the spiritual context. I had brought up the spiritual context of karet. could be, okay, it's not that the community cuts you off, it's that you've cut yourself off. You choose not to go to a Seder. How Jewish are you? Right? Meaning you've cut yourself off. If you can't even once a year go to a Seder.
Right. Or you might say, like, if this is a sin that you're going to be killed for it, this is an important thing. Really
That's right.
pay attention to this.
That's right. The second one, which is more, I think it's much more difficult, is the stoning, right? Stoning is actual, they're killing you. And that's why it says in the presence of witnesses who forewarned them. Literally, Maimonides sets up a thing, a framework that says, if we're going to actually stone someone for not observing Shabbos, I don't know, I'm at Laura's house and two people have to be at your house and they have to say, don't cook on Shabbat, because if you cook on Shabbat, you'll be stoned to death. Do you understand that? Two people would have to say that in front of witnesses in a public way, and then you'd have to do the activity. So I think what they're trying to build is they're trying to legislate it out. They're trying to legislate the death penalty out. They make it very hard to use. Notwithstanding the fact that they couldn't use it because they didn't have sovereignty over themselves. Which, thank God.
But it also sets up a negative thing of kind of encouraging people that as guardians of the community, you should be the Shabbat police for other people.
Absolutely. And when you walk through some places in Israel, it is really, really quite rough to see how differently observant people or secular folks get treated in religious neighborhoods. Yeah. Najat.
Are these practices, have they been applied before?
No.
The stoning, and is it something common?
No, that's what I'm saying. It's there wasn't really a time in Jewish history where we lived by this kind of religious law. Then we get the State of Israel in 1948. We still don't live by religious law.
But like in more conservative or like traditional.
You mean
circles?
No.
But would it be? It would be like frowned upon, or it would be yelled at.
No, it would be legislated out. They would make it so a religious court in an ultra Orthodox community would make it so difficult. We hope that it would just be legislated out. Gila and then Mike. Oh no, Gila's talking to someone else. Mike.
There's a law that says if your son is disrespectful to you, you can have him stoned. There's no record that was. No,
it didn't happen. Right. All right, let's go on to the text because we have a lot more text to do. And Zman Katsar. Would someone else want to read what is meant by honor, kavod? Unless you want to keep reading, Linda, you're welcome to.
What is meant by honor? The sages explained this by declaring that each person should wash face, hands, and feet with warm water on Friday in honor of the Sabbath, and then wrap themselves in a fringed garment and be seated with dignity in expectation of the Sabbath, receiving it as if they were coming to meet the king. The ancient sages used to assemble their disciples on Friday, put on their best clothes and say, "Come, let us go out to meet King Sabbath."
So in Hebrew, you know these words, Bo v'netzeh likrat Shabbat hamelech.
What's a melech? Wasn't it Malka?
Well, right. So he was it by the Kabbalists, but later it was Shabbat as she, but you can now see the original earlier text, Bo v'netzeh likrat Shabbat hamelech. What you sing every Friday night, if you join us in person or on the live stream, which you really should, come to our Friday night services. We have so much fun. It's only an hour, and then you get to go home and eat dinner or do whatever you want. But we have, right, Allison? We have so much fun on Friday nights. And especially in 2 weeks, we're going to have a rockin' Friday night. This week, we have, what do you call it? food, potluck, no pot, just luck, potluck, Friday night dinner after services. So I gotta say, I love this description of Shabbat. What does this make you think about? Honor Shabbat.
Probably like honoring your parents, because your parents have taught you to do this.
Well, maybe they've taught you to wash. Certainly, we wash more than our ancient ancestors did. But in the mid 1100s, how do you honor God in Shabbat? You wash your face and your hands and your feet with not just water, but what kind of water?
Hot water.
Yeah, with hot water, with warm water. So today it might be hard for us to understand how special that is. But think about in a world of limited resources, what it means to have a hot bath, have a hot shower, or think about if you know someone who's a refugee or homeless or anything where they don't get oh my goodness, what it means to be able to start the Sabbath off by being clean, not spiritually clean, physically clean first. And then you sit with dignity and you come to meet the Shabbat. It says king, and we have changed the language on that. Thank you to the Kabbalists for changing the language, because now we greet Shabbat as a queen. I guess we're going to move to a world of multiple genders where we'll say we greet Shabbat as queen, king, or they, or however you understand gender to be. Okay, now we're going to go to Ezahu Oneg, or Ezahi Oneg. What is meant by Sabbath delight? So anyone want to read that one, the last paragraph? It's the Cholent paragraph. Yeah, Shruti. Hi, Shruti. How's California?
Hi, it's good. Yeah, I'll read. What is meant by Sabbath delight? The sages explained this by declaring that one should prepare rich food and fragrant beverages for the Sabbath as much as they can afford. The more anyone spends for the Sabbath and the preparation of varied tasty food, the more praise they deserve. If, however, they cannot afford this, they may fulfill the Sabbath delight requirement by preparing any, I lost my page.
Anything? You want me to take over?
Oh, got it. By preparing anything like a vegetable stew in honor of the Sabbath. They are not obligated to strain themselves begging from others in order to eat much on the Sabbath. Indeed, the early sages said, make your Sabbath as a weekday so as not to become dependent on others.
Okay, so the first paragraph, kavod, the kavod is the physical part. So interesting. I think we live in a world where, we say, and I say, come as you are, come Friday night, come as you are. You don't need to change your clothes. It's true. But there is something a little bit special about the whole physically changing yourself, washing yourself and being clean and being renewed. And what is the delight part? This is about the other parts of your senses. So things that are rich and fragrant and food that's beautiful. But what don't we do? We balance it with not becoming dependent on others. So Maimonides knew that in some ways Jewish life was expensive, right? We know that today in different ways, right? Kosher food's expensive, some people say, or Jewish summer camps or synagogue life. And he's saying, you should make the Sabbath, but also balance it. Anyone want to say what you think Maimonides is trying to describe in terms of making Shabbat?
Make it special.
Yeah, make it special. Also, it's not about, he doesn't talk about going to shul, to going to synagogue. He talks about you and your person and your body and the ability to sleep and the ability to rest and the ability to have lovely meals. It's much different than how we might
Although we can understand, let's go and join and meet the Shabbat king as going to shul.
Yes.
If you want to.
So if you come on a Friday night, you can dress up as the Shabbat king or queen. We are welcoming you that way. And if you have a good tambourine, you're welcome to bring it with you on Friday nights as well. Okay, Shabbat as a symbol. I think I want to skip this because I think that I'll do it really quick. You shall therefore keep the Sabbath, for it is holy for you. Everyone who profanes it shall be put to death. How's that making you feel? Again, Laura, I think that this is really important. And so we're going to say the death penalty applies. Often when we have when we have to talk about something so often, it wasn't observed. So maybe it is also such intense punishment because they were trying to a little bit let people know that this is really important. I don't think it works for any of you or me, but something that might work. It is a sign between me and the people of Israel for all time that in 6 days God made the heavens and the earth, and on the 7th day ceased from work and rested. And yet, what do we say is Judaism's greatest gift to the world? The Shabbat. Not just for Jews, on whatever day you observe it, the Shabbat. Okay. Anyone have anything you want to say about this? So I know that there is.
I have a question. Is it so from this paragraph from Exodus, sort of God is sort of speaking that and saying that person will be put to death. It sort of feels like, you know, in Yom Kippur or like God is sort of inscribing your fate versus like, I could see how Maimonides would take that and say other people will stone you instead of God deciding your fate for not following the mitzvah.
So holy to the Lord, whoever does any work on the Sabbath day shall surely be put to death, but not by God, by the community, I think. I hope that's what it is. Okay. Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, I think the beginning of modern Orthodoxy or Orthodoxy and someone want to, Bob, did you want to read him?
Yeah, I think all of this cutoff and death and such is that you could not survive in the world they lived in isolation from others. I mean, there were hermits, I suppose, in Europe, other places, perhaps there were hermits, but you had to have a community, and it had to be your community. It had to be the community to which you would be accepted. And all of these, I think all of it, the death and the cutoff and everything else, is that you will be excluded. And it is the community that sets the standards and the limits. We've probably, everybody here has run into these nowadays sort of common Sephardim, Ashkenazi marriages, where they get into a discussion of whether you eat rice at Pesach. I had a medical student who was certain that he would be having rice at home because that's what he used. Always had rice at home. No, I'm sorry. He certain. I think I'm getting it backwards. But the point is, the wife said there's no rice, and there's no rice. So.
Yeah, I do think I think you're right. It's about communal norms and how we see ourselves within community, and the sense of the tightness of community was much different than it is now. We weave ourselves in and out of multiple communities. We like that about American life, but it's not how the world used to exist in any way. And sometimes we want the boundaries to be a little less porous, maybe, and to have our communities feel a little tighter. Have any of you seen the movie that won Best Screenplay, Women Talking?
No.
Oh my gosh, it's it won Best Screenplay, but it was an incredibly beautiful conversation about faith and community and faith communities. Do you know the story of that? I urge you to see it. It's a dilemma when women in a ultra-religious Christian community are raped and their girls are raped, and they have to figure out if they are going to leave the compound, right? It's a very ultra religious community or not. And how leaving, what that does to their sense of life and community. Anyway, totally recommend it. I think it speaks to what Bob's saying about us and maybe all of us needing a tighter sense of community. I want to do this piece quick because I want to go to the Chaim Grada because that's my favorite. So this is some Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. Behold, God crowned his work with the seventh day of creation, the first of human activity, and bestowed on it a constantly recurring sanctity and blessing, a sanctity that through it, man or people should be continually reminded of God's appointment by God in God's world to be God's servant, and that he or she should devote himself to that capacity. The Sabbath thus became the symbol of man's appointment by God, the symbol of God's rule and people's destiny. So the Sabbath now became the symbol of God's rule of this world and of Israel, and the task of the Jews as man and as Israelite. He's saying we need the Sabbath because it teaches us how to be human and how to be Jewish. But how can the Sabbath become such a symbol, education, and sanctification for this task? Man shows his domination over the earth in that he can fashion all things in his environment to his own purpose. He can transform everything into an instrument of human service. He is allowed to rule over the world. What he's going to say for 6 days, but on the seventh day, we're not in charge. On the seventh day, however, he is forbidden by divine behest to fashion anything. In that way, we acknowledge I have no right of ownership or authority over the world. That's the real Shabbat. I can't change the world on Shabbat. I can change it the other 6 days. I can change God's creation the other 6 days. But on this day, I can't. On this day, it's a full stop. It's not a stop for an hour at shul Friday night or 3 on Saturday morning. It's the 24-hour, 25-hour period. Therefore, even the smallest work done on Shabbat is a denial of the fact that God is the creator and master of the world. It's a beautiful idea. The Sabbath allows us to understand that we're not in charge, that we're not the ultimate creator, but also the Sabbath then allows us to work on the other 6 days. I'd like to go on with this beautiful, lovely piece by Chaim Grada, My Mother's Sabbath. Could someone read? Mike, did you have a comment?
Yes.
Okay.
Rabbi, I'm not trying to give you a hard time, but suppose you're at your Shabbos walk and you see somebody with a rifle about to kill animals. Can you ask them to stop? Can you intervene?
So I don't think that I don't know that I'd intervene right then because I think it might make you in danger. But I think we're talking more on the level of what does the Shabbat do for us? I'm not in the place of any individual law that we break. Generally, one can save a life on Shabbat.
Right.
Okay, who would like to read this beautiful piece of text? Chaim Grada. I need a reader. Thanks, Myra. Expressively.
Okay. I walk along Lennon Street, which is sunny, deserted, and quiet. On one side is the fence that stretches along the entire length of the park. What with the heat and the beer I have drunk, a heavy sweat breaks out on my brow. I feel dizzy, my feet falter, but I plod on so I will no longer have to hear the drunken voices behind me. Another melody is coming to me now, and it is in order to listen that I have left the park. Quiet and radiant, with no beginning, no end, the melody stretches through my memory like a ray of sunlight, and I follow the unending, luminous strand back to Vilna, back to my mother's house. From my earliest childhood, I remember how, on the Sabbath preceding the new moon, my mother, before she left for the synagogue, would chant a Yiddish prayer in the front room of the smithy near the workbench. And I, still sunk in sleep in the back, would hear it.
Okay, so I don't know if you've read Chaim Grada before, one of the most famous Yiddish poets and writers, 20th century, lived in Brooklyn, came from the old country, and he is literally remembering Shabbos in his mother's house, and he would hear this prayer: I beseech thee, O God, most praise, that thou shalt send me my substance and shalt feed me in my household and all of Israel. For this I do beseech thee. I whisper the words with the feeling that the melody is creeping out of a grave. I sense about it the stillness of a cemetery. My mother, I feel, is no longer chanting it. So for him, Shabbat is his mama. Just then, coming toward me, I see a Jew with grayish black beard wearing a black frock coat. He walks at a sedate pace, hands behind his back and a white kerchief around his neck, just like any urban Jewish householder, taking a late Sabbath afternoon stroll after his nap, and now on his way to the synagogue for the Mincha Marif prayers. When Chaim writes this, he's having us try to picture what another world looks like. The world, I don't know if any of you had it. Did you have a world of grandparents or great-grandparents who did observe the Sabbath in this ways? Good Sabbath and a good year. Good Shabbos and good yor. He stares at me astonished. Where is the young man from? From Lithuania. I'm a native of Vilna, and you? It doesn't matter, he answers grudgingly, and then, apparently deciding that I pose no threat to him, he adds, I'm from White Russia, but I was living elsewhere. When I saw you wearing that kerchief, I realized at once that this is the Sabbath. I blurted out joyfully. It never occurred to me to wonder if there's an Eruv in Stalinbad. What do you think he's saying? In the old country, Sabbath was Sabbath. In the Golden Medina, here, it is different. So I'm going to leave the rest of the story for you to read on your own, but know that many of us don't have these memories. But there's a whole group of American and Western Jews that have memories of great-grandparents observing Sabbath in a way that we don't. I'm going to number D, text 5, Achad Ha'am. I said this earlier, more than Israel has kept
Could
the
I
Sabbath.
share something?
Yeah.
About that. I was living in Princeton very early on when I came to Princeton, and Herschel Matt was still the rabbi at the Jewish Center. And I was back a couple of years from Israel, so I had experienced Shabbat there in a completely different way. And it was Shabbat, and I didn't observe, and I was running around the campus, and suddenly I saw Herschel Matt and his wife spaziering. They were walking, but at a completely different pace.
Shabbos pace. Explain to them what the word a spazier is.
It's kind of stroll. It's walking for pleasure. But I remember it's such a vivid memory. I saw them. I knew exactly what they were doing, and it just stopped me cold in my steps. And I've always thought that if I observed, that's where I wanted to be.
In that walk, in that the way of being in that time.
That's right.
Yeah, I think that we do hold time. We hope, we talked about on Shabbat with Heschel, that Heschel thought we hold time differently on Shabbat. It's interesting. I have this running conversation with Avi Paradise and Nancy Lewis, because I am someone who, when I'm leading a service, I want the service to end at the time we tell you. So if it's a Friday night, I want it to end at 7:30 because I want you to go home and have Shabbat dinner. And if it's ending on Shabbos morning, I want it to end at noon, because I think keeping people more than 2.5 hours is like a long time, but also I'm keeping you from your Shabbat lunch. But what that does for me, Linda, is that I have to wear a watch. And the first thing I like to do on Shabbat is take the watch off. And it's because of that sense of letting the day unfold. I think if I did not wear a watch at services, it might give Nancy a heart attack, right? It is
enjoy it as long as you'd like. It's fine.
No, it's not just, it's everyone. It's me too. It's the food's getting cold. It's when you're at a Seder and everyone says, when are we eating? When are we eating? It's Shabbat is the time when you should just be able to be.
Mhm.
To be. I hope you get that. Hope everyone here gets that sense of a long, as the clocks were just changed, this is the first week. Two things. It's the first week where I will be running like a chicken without a head on Friday afternoon to have everything done before Shabbat, before candle lighting, which I think is really early this week. I don't know what time it is. I got to look. And then Saturday afternoon, just the day can unfold. Shabbat ends pretty late on Saturday now that the clocks have changed. So you can have that Shabbat walk. So if we didn't have more than Israel kept the Sabbath kept Israel. If we didn't have Shabbat, what keeps Israel now? I don't mean the state of Israel. I mean the people of Israel.
Their heritage.
Okay, be more concrete.
It's the feeling that no matter what part of Judaism you belong to, you still belong, you always belong to the Jewish community.
Thank you. Elliot, were you had something? Yeah. But you're on.
Yeah, the unmute. To me, it would have to be the Torah that might keep the Jews as a people. That's the only other thing I can think of, actually, that might do it.
Well, we eat different. If we keep kosher, we eat differently, which is part of the Torah. So that's why we have this Achad Ha'am quote right before Mordechai Kaplan, Judaism as a Civilization, one of the longest books you'll ever read, one of the most important thinkers. A second group of folk ways essential to giving the home Jewish atmosphere consist of the practices which center around Sabbaths and festivals. And so take away the word home here and just think about it as community as well. The Sabbath is not only a means of collective self-expression, it's the principal institution through which each Jew individually can experience the spiritualizing influence of Jewish civilization. As a result of mechanization and over-industrialism of present-day life, the human being has come to stand in greater need of Sabbath than ever before. He already wrote this, right? 50, 60 years ago or more. Sabbath morning service should be the principal one of each week. You know how we know that Kaplan wrote it so long ago? His next sentence. Even the men who are engaged in business should be induced to absent themselves. So then he's saying, look, it's the gathering time for the whole community to come. This week is Parashat Vayakel. So Vayakel, we have a double parasha, Vayakel Pekudei, and Vayakel, it's from the word Kihila, or the word Kihila comes from Vayakel, to gather and to be as a community. And, you know, Kaplan is saying, we gather as a community on Shabbat morning. Which, no offense to the people who come Friday night. I love the Friday night service, but the main gathering point for Shabbat was Saturday morning because people would go home and have a Shabbat dinner. Okay. This is what Kaplan thinks Judaism as a civilization could be. On Sabbath afternoon, the synagogue ought to conduct educational and recreational activities. There should be lectures, roundtable discussions, study circles, literary circles, reading in the synagogue library, and Sabbath school sessions for children. I cannot tell you how much I agree with that. Do you know why Americans have Sunday school? Anyone know why? What's the history of it?
The churches had Sunday school?
Yep. And if you look at most churches, they'll have Sunday school for an hour and a half before church. It's brilliant. And then you're already there and you go to church. Our educational system would be better off to be not on the same day as the churches, but on the same theory. You come and live in Jewish time. We did that this past week on Saturday. For any of you who were here at Shabbat services, we call it Shabbat Likulanu. And we had a bunch of kids here with us. So we got to study together and sing together and be together. Next time we'd like more. The next one I think is in May, and I hope we'll have more kids.
Also in the materials that went out for the future of the Jewish Center, what you just said is one of the very prominent parts in it, and it should be. let it happen.
Okay. And then what he talks about is something that we all know, which is sports on Shabbat should be a really good way to gather. The trick is he wanted us to gather as a Jewish community to do sports on Shabbat as a way of identity building. Okay, the last texts are from Heschel, the Shabbat. It's Meeting for Modern People. And I've already given out 2 copies from talking about it on Shabbat. I don't have many left, but I can loan you, or go onto Amazon and buy yourself for however much it costs. It's worth owning The Sabbath by Heschel. So these are just 3 beautiful short quotes. Of course, my favorite is that we build cathedrals in time, not in place, notwithstanding the person who wanted to argue about that, which is okay. Who would like to read page 16, Heschel, E? Shabbat as wonder. Thank you, Elliot.
The art of keeping the 7th day is the art of painting on the canvas of time, the mysterious grandeur of the climax of creation. As he sanctified the 7th day, so shall we. The love of the Sabbath is the love of man for what he and God have in common. Our keeping the Sabbath day is a paraphrase of a sanctification of the 7th day.
Okay, let's stop. Give that a moment. Let it sink in. And then anyone want to say anything about it?
Wow.
The art of painting on the canvas of time.
Of time. It's beautiful. Wow.
He understood art and music and beauty. His wife was this concert pianist, but she did not practice her piano on Shabbat because it was asur. It was forbidden. All right, Mike, I'll get you at the end. We're going to go through all 3 of them first.
The 7th day is like a palace in time with a kingdom for all. It is not a date, but an atmosphere. It is not a different state of consciousness, but a different climate. It is as if the appearance of all things somehow changed. The primary awareness is one of our being within the Sabbath rather than of the Sabbath being within us. We may not know whether our understanding is correct or whether our sentiments are noble, but the air of the day surrounds us like spring which spreads over the land without our aid or notice. When we celebrate the Sabbath, we adore precisely something we do not see. To name it queen, to call it bride is merely to allude to the fact that its spirit is a reality we meet rather than an empty span of time, which we choose to set aside for comfort or recuperation. Wow.
Mike, did you have a comment?
Yes, to paint on the canvas of time means that, to me, it means that it's symbolic painting, but unlike a painting where you paint on canvas or on a wall, the painting on the canvas of time stays and it can be enjoyed by other people and they can learn from it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, although like that's the thing about time, it's moving always. It's always moving. It's never static. But interesting, I don't think about it. Laura, but you're
yeah, I had heard, building on that metaphor, that you might look at it that in your life, your task, your painting, your own life painting is your expression of who you are and where your life is going. And Shabbat is a time where you put down your paintbrush and you take a few steps back from your canvas and you look and you see and you think about what you're doing and maybe how you need to approach it differently, or even just to appreciate what you've got so far.
beautiful. So I'd love if we could take just a few more minutes, and if you could think about something that you do on Shabbat that is so lovely that you want to give it as a gift to other people and say, you know what, I do this, you might like to do it as well. Or something you don't do. I'm going to say I don't do laundry on Shabbat. Not ever. It is definitely melacha. I don't fold laundry. I don't do laundry on Shabbat. I hate doing laundry. It is definitely part of melacha, so it doesn't happen on Shabbos. Yep.
One of the most important things is that Marcia, my wife, and I celebrated together and enjoy the service together, and in a sense, light candles together and have wine together. And it's another important thing that we share, which I think is really important.
So lovely to have someone to share that. And, you know, not everyone does. So if you don't, that is when, if you don't have someone to share those Shabbat actions with, that's when we start to create, you know, holy chaburot,
Right.
groups of people who do that together. And so that's, you know, a lovely thing to be able to say. I always think that we should provide wine on Friday night for people in case they're not going to go home for Shabbat, just like we provide wine on Saturday, but that everyone, it's not symbolic. We should all, do a l'chaim together, but also think about folks who don't have someone to light candles with or do other parts of Shabbat with, and reach out to them. So thank you. And also lucky the two of you that you both do that. It's wonderful. Who else has a Shabbat thing? Yeah, Laura?
This was probably one that a lot of you guys might do, but when I light my Shabbos candles, after I say the blessing and before I open my eyes and say Shabbat Shalom, I think about something about the past week that I was grateful for, or something that I hope, will be in the week to come. Like I kind of give myself a chance for a little personal prayer. And the other thing I always love to do, not just on Shabbat, but every day, is to get outside in nature in some way.
Thank you. To have that few moments of kavanah when you're lighting candles, you're lighting yourself, even just to sort of be within yourself for a little bit, and then also to be outside in the world, the natural world. Yeah, Sam.
Yeah, I always read this on the left side of the prayer book. One is Shalom Noach Brzezowski. On weekdays, we may be too distracted, too involved with our work and our responsibilities to see the holiness of everyday life. The gift of Shabbat is that all we experience, every meal, every meeting with another person, every joy can be seen as holy. And then this by Hillel Zeitlin, everything you see enwraps holiness. Take away the outer shell and gaze at the spiritual beauty.
So beautiful.
Wow.
So one great thing to do on Shabbat is to read all the commentary on the sides of the pages of Lev Shalem. If you do it at home, it's really wonderful and beautiful. Yeah, Allison.
So here's an endorsement for everyone. So I really like to sing on Shabbat, and I don't sing that much during the week, and I certainly don't sing communally during the week. So going to Friday night services and singing is a tremendous joy.
And for me too, to have you there singing, so that we can all be singing together. It's really, there's a lovely growing group of people who come on Friday nights. So I'd love if you joined us, or if you brought someone with you, and we'd like to grow in intensity of our tefillah. So the other radical idea I want to just offer you is that we as moderns are happy with the let's go to Shabbat services, or let's do one thing, or let's have a Shabbat meal. But I want to encourage you to find some time to do Yom Shekulo Shabbat, where the entire day is Shabbat, where you block it off 25, 26 hours, a little bit before candle lighting, a little bit before the sun goes down, and a little bit after the sun goes down the next night. and to not change anything in the world, not make a purchase. I mean, obviously, if it's for health or whatever, but to just stop and see how it feels for a Shabbat. Anyone else have a gift of what Shabbat could feel like or does feel like? Okay, well, I want to just tell you about a couple upcoming things that are pretty exciting in our community, which is tomorrow morning, Avi Paradise is doing the Nosh and Drosh. And I'd love for people to come hear him and hear his theory of davening and how he got to this place. Tomorrow night, Andrea Gaynor is doing the Great Mind Salon. Friday night is potluck Shabbat dinner. I think we had more people making desserts than other things. So if you want to come, bring a side dish. I think there's about 50 or 60 people coming. We'd love for you to be the next one, unless you're having dinner at home or at someone's house. That's good too. Saturday morning, we have a bar mitzvah of Bryce Johnson, and not his mama was bat mitzvah at TJC. So we are a third generation kid, the Shabbos. On Monday night is the rescheduled Susie Fishbein. And Tuesday night next week, I hope to see you back here. We're going to go back to stuff earlier. And thank you. Also, if you have extra places at your Seder for someone, let me know. If you need a place at Seder for you or for someone, let me know. And thank you, thank you, thank you. Anyone have anything they want to say that is happy, fun, or good in the world? The Karpenheim family, that's so funny. So I'll be on Nassau Street walking the dog in a little bit if anyone wants to say hi.
Thank you all.
Thank you. It's Wednesday night, so we can say, usually it's Tuesday night. We can't say Good Shabbos, but it's close enough that we can say Shabbat Shalom Umivorach.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Bye, everyone.